Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm bringing you another episode in my series on getting into publishing. I will leave my previous videos on the publishing industry linked down below in the description, as well as a bunch of other videos from other people in the industry and other resources for you to check out as well. For a little bit of context, I'm a junior key account manager in the sales team of a children's publisher, and I've been in the industry since July 2019. Prior to that, I also did a publishing master's, which is something that I'm going to do another episode talking about, but today we are going to be talking about interviews. And I think for a lot of people, interviews are the most daunting prospect when it comes to getting a job, but I love interviews. I'm quite a chatty, extroverted person. I love meeting new people. They don't really intimidate me in that way. I do get some nerves in my tummy, but overall I really enjoy them. So if managing nerves and that kind of thing is something that you are looking for advice on, I'm probably not the best person because I don't really get too anxious about job interviews. But as I said, I will leave other videos links down below in the description for lots of other people who talk about getting into publishing. In terms of preparing for interviews, that's where I think I've got some pretty decent advice to give you guys. So you have smashed your CV and cover letter, you have been invited for interview. This step at the moment looks quite different to how it did when I was getting into the industry. Obviously, remote interviews on camera are now a thing, and I do hope even post-COVID it will be more accepted for you to ask to have a video interview, or publishers will just have it as the norm. Because I know when I was trying to get into the industry, I was living in Derby at the time where I was doing my master's, and it was such a pain getting down to London. I couldn't really afford trains at the time, so I was getting National Express coaches, and it took such a long time. I had to get up so early in the morning. So hopefully even post-COVID, that option will be there for you to have a video interview. That's what I'm hopeful for anyway. But in this video, I will be talking about both circumstances, having an in-person interview and also a Zoom interview. And the process of preparation is kind of the same either way, and that is you should research. How do you learn best? If you want to write down notes and color code them and highlight them, then go ahead. I was someone that just repetitively read, and that is things about the publisher. So I was reading about them on the bookseller website, I was reading about them on The Guardian and what kind of books they were publishing. I was scrolling through their social media to see if they were doing anything interesting. I was looking at awards and prizes and just trying to absorb as much information about this publisher. I didn't mention everything that I had learned in my interview, but I was familiar enough with the publisher that I was able to scatter little bits of my research throughout my interview. And that goes for getting entry-level positions and the more senior role that I now have. In terms of learning facts and figures, I was very cautious of rote learning things. But if you do want to learn some facts like a significant sales milestone that a book has just passed, maybe a publisher has made a significant donation to charity recently, I don't think there's a reason to stress about remembering the exact number, but just remembering that it happened shows your research. Also, if you're genuinely interested in the publisher and what they do, this won't feel like work as such. It'll be learning about something that you're interested in. I would say don't bother learning about the history of the company unless it's very recent history. For example, if it's a publisher that has been around for a very, very long time, the interviewer is not going to care that you know what year it was founded in. Maybe if it's an independent publisher that was only founded a couple of years ago and you want to talk about how impressive it is that they have achieved so much in such a short space of time, then maybe it's relevant there. But if it's a much older publisher, they're not going to care about the facts about when the company was founded. They want to know that you know about what the company is doing right now or in the past year or so. It depends what kind of role you're going for, what the kind of questions you might expect are. Sometimes you will be able to demonstrate your research scattered through questions where you're actually talking about yourself. Maybe you are someone who has worked in the charity sector before and that's something that you're really passionate about. And when you're talking about that, you might also want to mention that you are really impressed by the charitable contribution that this publisher makes. That's just one example. There may be other questions where you are directly asked to talk about something in the company. So perhaps a book that they published that you really enjoyed. If it's a marketing job, they might ask you to talk about a marketing campaign that you were really impressed by. Maybe if it's a job that has something to do with how their websites are set up, what would you change about that website? What did you like about it and what did you dislike about it? Be prepared for those questions and know that if they do ask something like that, you know what you're gonna say. Don't be thrown by questions like a time you worked well in a team, a situation where you dealt with conflict, a situation where you demonstrated strong time management skills, a time when you overcame a challenge, an example of a time where you managed multiple projects at once. Think about these questions and know what example you are going to pull from either your education or your work or your volunteering history, know what example you're going to give. Equally, it is perfectly okay if they ask a question that you haven't thought about before. Allow yourself some time to think. You don't need to answer immediately. Take your time and consider how you would like to respond. Little tips if you do want to buy yourself some extra thinking time is take a sip of your drink or say a phrase like, "That's a really interesting question." Gives you some extra time to formulate your answer. And equally, don't be afraid to admit that there is a gap in your knowledge. In fact, a question that is so difficult to answer and doesn't need to be is, what are your weaknesses? Talking about a gap in your knowledge can be a fantastic way to answer this question, and the best way to answer this question is always something that you can tangibly change. Maybe you are lacking skills and experience in a particular computer program. For me, before I was in the publishing industry, I did not know how to use Excel, and I freely admitted that in a job interview I had for an entry-level job, and I still got the job. I fully admitted that I did not know how to use it properly. This is something that they can teach you. This is something that you can improve on actively. They don't expect you to be able to do absolutely everything right away. You are gonna be learning, and presenting yourself as someone who is eager to learn and willing to learn is really beneficial. And you can always turn the question around. This is something that happened to me in an interview for, again, the same job, and I got the job. I was given a hypothetical scenario and asked how I would deal with that scenario, and I answered initially, but I could tell that the interviewer was pushing me to say something else, that I hadn't got the right answer. It is fine to say you're not sure. You can always say, well, these are my initial thoughts on how I would deal with this situation, but I would be interested to hear how you would recommend I deal with this situation because I'm a little unsure. That is what would happen in the workplace. If you were faced with something and you didn't know how to do it, you would ask for help, or at least you should ask for help. Positioning yourself as someone who is willing to ask for help and advice and guidance is a good thing. I genuinely think emphasizing that I am that kind of person that will ask for advice and help if I need it was instrumental in me getting all of the jobs that I've got. In fact, if I'm being honest, I think in the role I'm in now, in an ideal world, there would have been someone with more experience taking on that role. But because from the get-go, I have given people that trust in me and been able to say, I don't have experience doing this, but I'm keen to learn, I will learn, and I will ask for your help if I need it, that has cemented me as someone who is really trustworthy. Employers would much rather someone like that than someone who plows ahead, gets it wrong, and wastes time and resources. This sounds like something really obvious to say, but try and get on with your interviewers. As much as your experience and how you demonstrate that experience and skill in your interview is important, it's also important that you are the type of person that they can spend every day with and can get along with. So, be yourself, a professional version of yourself, but it's okay to smile, it's okay to have a laugh, it's okay to crack a work appropriate joke. If your interviewer comes away from that conversation having had a positive interaction with you, thinking that you're a nice person and someone they got along with and someone they enjoyed speaking to, then that's a win. And don't be afraid to make it a dialogue. As much as it is them interviewing you, don't be afraid to ask questions back. Now, I know this is very easy for me to say as someone who is very chatty and comfortable and confident around meeting new people. As I said, I have linked lots of other resources down below in the description as well. At the end of the interview, they are going to ask you, do you have any questions for us? And you should have questions. Maybe your interviewer mentioned something along the way that you are intrigued by, that you want to learn more about. You can ask them. Or you could ask them something like, what has your company learned from working remotely? If it's something that you're genuinely interested in as well, don't be afraid to ask. What is the company doing to make the workforce more diverse? Or ask something about the interviewer, what do you love most about your job? What book do you have coming up that you're really excited about? People love to talk about themselves. And of course, when will I hear from you is a perfectly valid question as well. But I would always encourage you to ask something that shows your interest in the company and that you want to learn more about it. Something that I asked for my most recent interview, and this is a much ballsier question, I think, and this wasn't for an entry-level job, but I asked, do you have any doubts about whether I would be able to fulfill this role? It is a bit ballsier and you are kind of forcing your interviewer to show their hand, but equally, if they do have any doubts, if there's anything you have lacking in experience that they're a little bit unsure about, it gives you an opportunity to put that to bed. I think this question worked particularly well for me going for a sales role. Now, I'm going to move on to some of what might be considered the silly questions about preparing for interviews. They're not silly at all. I think particularly if you are someone who is from a background like my own and doesn't have maybe a parent who has had a job interview in a similar kind of situation, and you don't have someone to ask about these kind of things, they can be really confusing. The first of these questions is, what do you wear? I would say it's always better to be overdressed than underdressed, and I mean, you've got common sense, don't go in a pair of tracksuit bottoms, don't go in there dressed dressed as if you're about to go on a night out afterwards, or so formal that it looks like you're going to a wedding. Smart casual is so confusing. I would say jeans are also too casual. And something I also found really confusing, even when I got into the publishing industry, was that there was a real range on how people dress. Once you're in the job, like wearing jeans to the office is completely normal. But I would say for an interview, you know, do dress formally, but don't stress about it. A nice pair of trousers, a nice shirt, a nice top, pencil skirt if that's your vibe. You should feel put together and prepared and professional, but you shouldn't feel uncomfortable. If you are doing a Zoom interview, I would still recommend getting properly dressed. Obviously, they're only gonna see you from like here up, but it's more about how you feel. So equally, if you want to like do your hair, or if you are someone who wears makeup and that makes you feel comfortable and confident and put together, then go for it. I would say don't stress too much about how the camera looks when it comes to Zoom interviews. If it's a rubbish quality camera, that's fine. One way of improving that is if you can face a window, that will naturally improve your lighting. I would say how I'm sat now is quite good framing in terms of like where your eyes are and like how you're positioned and that kind of thing. But again, don't stress too much. In the age of Zoom interviews, I hear so many people talking about getting their backgrounds looking perfect. And I understand that. People putting the books that they own from that particular publisher in the background. I think it's a nice touch, but ultimately I don't think it's something that is gonna make or break anything. We could talk forever about the class privilege that there is in having a background that is full of books. So again, if it's something that makes you feel prepared and like you've done something, then go ahead. But I think that's something that's more gonna like make you feel good rather than something that's gonna be like a tangible difference in how well you do in the interview. How early should you arrive? If it's an in-person interview, I would say 10 minutes. I am someone who is always very early for everything, and in fact I've now realized that being say 20 minutes early for an interview is actually really inconvenient for your interviewer. They are in the middle of doing something. They don't need to be thinking, oh, I need to hurry up because this person is waiting in reception. So I would say 10 minutes is really good. If you have to go and talk to a receptionist, then make sure you are nice to them. Sounds like such an obvious thing to say, and I know you would be nice to them because, you know, you're a polite, normal person. But I have heard of instances where after you've gone, the interviewer will ask the receptionist if you were polite. It's a little bit trickier to tell you how early to be for a Zoom interview. Get yourself settled wherever you want to be sat, you know, get yourself a drink. Give yourself plenty of time to find the email that has the Zoom link in it. Get the Zoom link open. And I would say for the 2 interviews I've had remotely, I was in the Zoom call about 2 minutes before the interview was meant to happen. Depending on how they've set the call up, you might go straight through to the Zoom, or you might be put in a waiting room, so you won't be let in before the person hosting the meeting has entered. But I would say if you're just there 2 minutes early, you know, you're there, you're ready. If you do share a house with people, whether that's housemates or family, do make them aware that you have an interview and that they should respect that and keep things quiet. Just like how you would turn your phone off for an in-person interview, turn your phone off for a Zoom interview, or put your phone in a different room. The final thing that I want to mention in relation to Zoom interviews is that tech problems happen. If your connection is slow, if your Wi-Fi cuts out, it's fine. I know that can be really stressful, but people are really understanding of that now. Most people in the publishing industry have been working from home for like a year now. We are well accustomed to internet connections being slow, whether that's on the interviewer side or the interviewee's side. It happens. Do not stress about lag. If you didn't quite catch something that the interviewer says, then ask them to repeat it. It's completely fine. We are all well used to those kind of technology blips now. At the end of the interview, if it's in person, do shake their hand. Say you're looking forward to hearing from them. Say that you hope they enjoy the rest of their day. You know, be polite. Be a nice, likable person. And then, when it's all done, you can breathe. And then it's just a waiting game. Second interviews are quite common in publishing, and I would say preparing for the second interview is essentially kind of the same process. They might just ask you a few different questions. They might ask you to prepare a task. So for my most recent job interview, I had to prepare a presentation, and they also gave me a question to think about prior to the interview. For the entry-level job I also had to do a test in my second interview, and there isn't really a way to prepare for that kind of test because it is kind of spelling and basic numeracy. For that test, I was left in a room on my own for I think it was half an hour, and I had 6 tasks to complete. And as much as I knew they were testing how well I performed in those tasks, they were also testing how quickly I completed those tasks and if I was able to get them done in the half an hour. They did also ask me questions about how I prioritized the tasks, whether I did them just like task 1 to 6 or I started with the one that I knew I would do the most quickly. So there was kind of tests within the tests, if that makes sense, and there isn't really a way to prepare for something like that. Some of the tasks were kind of circle the correct spelling spelling of these commonly misspelled words. There were some maths questions in there. I did have one task which was to respond to a complaints email. Again, there isn't really a way to prepare for those kind of tests, but just take a deep breath, complete the tasks as well as you can. If you are faced with tasks like that or tests like that, they are just one part of the whole interview. You know, if you've done an amazing interview and you get a couple of maths questions wrong, I don't think that's going to be the thing that stops you from getting a job. It may do if there is someone who is like you are neck and neck with in terms of who they're going to pick and they have to pick it based on something, but just do your best. That is all of the advice that I have before interviews, but if there's anything else you would like to talk about, do leave me a comment down below and I can give advice as best as I can. And do be sure to check out the resources that I've left in the description as well. I hope some of this was useful for you, and if you want to see more of my videos about either books or publishing, do make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can see whenever I upload a new video. That's all for me today. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will talk to you in my next video.